The Valanthi Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships traveled between 900 worlds, and no species had ever dared to challenge them. They were old, powerful, and they believed they were better than everyone else in the galaxy. Humanity was a young species compared to them. Humans had only discovered how to travel faster than light 300 years ago. The Valanthi watched these strange creatures from Earth with amusement. They saw humans spread to a few small colonies and thought nothing of it. Humans were like children playing in a sandbox, while adults ran the real world. Earth had joined the Galactic Concord as a minor member. Humans traded with other species, explored new planets, and built small settlements. They shared their medical discoveries and their art. Other species found humans charming and harmless. Some even thought humans were useful because they were good at solving arguments between more powerful civilizations. Nobody feared humanity. Nobody thought twice about them at all. On the morning of June 14, 2847, a Valanthi battlecruiser entered a small star system called Kepler 442. The ship was commanded by Fleet Admiral Zorvax, a decorated military officer who had grown bored during the long peace. He wanted to remind the lesser species of their place in the galaxy. Kepler-442b was a tiny human colony world. Only 40,000 people lived there. They were farmers, teachers, shopkeepers, and families who wanted a quiet life away from the busy core worlds. Among the small towns and villages was a place called the Sunrise Children's Home. The orphanage housed 312 children. Most of them had lost their parents in a terrible mining accident 2 years earlier. The caretakers had worked hard to give these children a new home, a place where they could heal and grow and dream of the future. Admiral Zorvax had chosen this target carefully. The colony had no soldiers, no weapons, and no way to defend itself. It was perfect for what he wanted to do. The attack lasted 17 minutes. Valanthi weapons rained down from the sky like fire from an angry god. Buildings exploded into dust. Fields burned. People ran and screamed, but there was nowhere to hide. The Sunrise Children's Home took a direct hit in the first wave of the attack. When the silence finally came, 289 children were dead. 34 caretakers who had tried to protect them died as well. Across the colony, 32,000 civilians had been killed. The survivors stumbled through the ruins, calling out names that would never be answered. Among the dead was a 7-year-old girl named Lucy Grant. She had been standing near a window when the attack began. Instead of running, she had looked up at the strange lights in the sky with wonder. She did not understand that those lights meant death. She was gone before she could feel any fear. Lucy Grant was the goddaughter of Admiral Catherine Cole, commander of Earth's Third Fleet. The news reached Earth within hours. Communication signals carried the images of destruction across the stars. People gathered around screens in homes and offices and public squares, watching in horror as rescue workers pulled small bodies from the rubble. The Galactic Concord, the organization that kept peace between civilizations, issued statements of concern. Representatives from dozens of species expressed their sympathy. They called for calm and promised to investigate. The Valanthi Empire said nothing. No explanation, no apology, just silence. Admiral Zorvax returned home as a hero. He gave interviews to Valanthi news programs, laughing as he described the attack. He talked about how the human children had screamed, how their caretakers had begged for mercy. He found the whole thing entertaining. His superiors promoted him for showing initiative. On Earth, people watched these interviews with quiet faces. They did not shout or cry or throw things at their screens. They simply watched, and something old and terrible began to wake up inside them. For 2,000 years, humanity had been peaceful. They had put away their weapons and their wars. They had chosen to be gentle, to be kind, to be the species they had always wished they could be. They had buried their violent history so deep that most humans had forgotten it was ever there. But forgetting is not the same as erasing. The capacity for violence still lived in human hearts, passed down through countless generations. It slept like a dragon in a cave, waiting for something to wake it. The death of 312 children was enough. Catherine. Cole received the news while on duty aboard her flagship. She read the casualty report 3 times, her hands steady and her face showing nothing. Then she went to her private quarters, locked the door, and sat in the darkness for a long time. She remembered Lucy's laugh. She remembered teaching the girl to play chess, remembered the way Lucy's face would scrunch up when she was thinking hard about her next move. She remembered promising Lucy's mother, her best friend, who had died in that mining accident, that she would always look after the child. She had failed that promise. When Catherine finally emerged from her quarters, her officers saw something different in her eyes. The calm, professional admiral they knew was still there. But underneath was something cold and sharp and very, very patient. She requested an immediate meeting with the United Earth Council. Her message was short and direct. "We need to talk about what comes next," she said. Across human space, similar transformations were happening. Parents held their children tighter and thought about those 312 kids who would never grow up. Soldiers who had never seen combat looked at the images from Kepler 442b and felt something stir in their blood. Scientists put down their research and started asking questions about weapons that had been forbidden for centuries. The galaxy did not notice these changes. The Valenthi Empire certainly did not care. To them, humanity was still the harmless young species that posed no threat to anyone. The attack on Kepler 442b was already old news. Forgotten in favor of more important matters, they had no idea what they had, awakened deep beneath the mountains and ice of Earth. In vaults that had been sealed for 2,000 years, ancient machines began to hum. Lights flickered on in chambers that had known only darkness for generations. Computers that had slept since before humanity reached the stars started running diagnostics. The caretakers of these hidden places, men and women whose families had guarded these secrets for centuries, received messages they had always hoped would never come. The messages all said the same thing. It was time to remember the United Earth. Council met in emergency session 3 days after the attack. Representatives from every human colony filled the great chamber, their faces grim and their voices quiet. President Daniel Moore stood at the center podium, holding a tablet that displayed the final casualty count, 30-2,000 dead, 312 of them children. He read each number slowly, letting the weight of it settle over the room. When he finished, he set down the tablet and looked at the assembled representatives. "The Galactic Concord has offered to mediate," he said. "The Valanthi Empire has offered nothing. They believe we are weak. They believe we will accept this and move on." He paused, and his voice dropped lower. "They are wrong." What Daniel Moore said next was known only to a select few humans before that day. It was a secret passed down through generations, guarded more carefully than any treasure. It was the truth about what humanity really was. Before the stars, before the peace, before the gentle civilization that the galaxy knew, there had been something else. For tens of thousands of years, humans had been the most efficient killers their planet had ever produced. They had invented ways to destroy each other that would make even the oldest spacefaring species sick with horror. They had built weapons that could crack the Earth itself. They had created poisons that could kill millions in hours. They had developed strategies of war so cruel and effective that their own historians refused to write about them in detail. Every generation had found new and better ways to make other humans suffer. Then, 2,000 years ago, humanity had finally achieved lasting peace. It had taken centuries of war, billions of deaths, and the near destruction of their entire civilization. But when it was over, the survivors made a choice. They decided that they would never be that species again. They dismantled their weapons. They buried their war fleets beneath the ice at the poles of Earth. They rewrote their history books to focus on art, science, and cooperation rather than conquest and destruction. They became the peaceful humans that eventually reached the stars, but they did not destroy everything. Some voices had argued for keeping the old weapons just in case. Some families had volunteered to guard the secrets, to maintain the ancient ships, to keep the knowledge alive even as the rest of humanity forgot. Admiral Catherine Cole descended into the war archives beneath the Colorado mountains 1 week after the attack. The elevator took her down for almost 10 minutes, deep into rock that had been hollowed out before humanity discovered electricity. General Marcus Webb met her at the bottom. His family had maintained these archives for 6 generations. He had spent his entire life hoping he would never have to show anyone. What was down here? The chamber stretched into darkness in every direction. Rows of massive cryogenic pods filled the space, each one containing a ship that had been built before humanity knew other species existed. These air not exploration vessels or trading ships. They had been designed for one purpose only. How many? Catherine asked. 12,000 capital ships, Marcus answered. 40,000 support vessels. 2 million ground combat units. Everything is fully operational. We have kept them ready. Catherine walked slowly between the pods, running her fingers along the cold metal. Each ship was a monument to humanity's violent past. Each one had been built to kill on a scale that the galaxy could not imagine. "Show me the weapons," she said. Marcus took her to another section of the archives where the smaller systems were stored. Kinetic bombardment platforms that could turn cities to dust. Biological agents that had been banned before the first human left Earth. Nuclear devices small enough to fit in a pocket but powerful enough to destroy a mountain. And stranger things, weapons that bent the laws of physics in ways that even their creators did not fully understand. "We have everything," Marcus said quietly. "Everything humanity ever created to destroy itself. It is all here, waiting." Catherine stood in silence for a long time. She thought about Lucy, about the other children, about the Volanthi admiral who had laughed while describing their deaths. She thought about the 2,000 years of peace that humanity had worked so hard to build. Then she made her decision. "Wake them," she said. "Wake all of them." The order went out to every hidden archive on Earth and across human space. The secret keepers who had waited their whole lives received the signal they had dreaded. Across 100 worlds, ancient machines hummed to life. The awakening took months. Ships that had slept for 2 millennia needed careful attention before they could fly again. Systems had to be tested, upgraded, integrated with modern technology. Human engineers who had studied the old designs in theory now saw them in reality. And many of them wept at what their ancestors had created. Volunteers came forward by the millions. Young people who had never known violence felt something stir in their blood. An ancient instinct that their peaceful society had never quite erased. Training programs that had existed only in simulations became real. Soldiers learned to fight from instructors, whose knowledge stretched back to humanity's darkest days. Catherine. Cole took command of what they called the First Retribution Fleet. She named her flagship the Sunrise. After the orphanage that had been destroyed, every other ship in the fleet was named for one of the children who had died that day. 312 ships, each carrying the memory of a child who would never grow up. General Marcus Webb assembled his ground forces with the same care. Every unit was assigned the name of a dead child. Every soldier carried a small photograph of the child they would fight for. The factories of Earth converted to war production almost overnight. Machines that had built consumer goods for centuries now produced weapons and armor. Scientists who had spent their careers studying stars and planets turned their minds to destruction. President Daniel Moore watched these preparations with a heavy heart. He had hoped to lead humanity through an era of continued peace. Instead, he was leading them back into the darkness they had escaped so long ago. But he did not hesitate. Some things were worth fighting for. The Volanthi Empire noticed the unusual activity in human space. Their spies reported increased industrial output, military movements, and a strange intensity in human communications. But their analysts dismissed these reports. Humanity was weak, they concluded. Whatever the humans were doing, it could not possibly threaten the greatest empire in the galaxy. They could not have been more wrong. The sleeping giant was finally awake, and it was very, very angry. 6 months passed after the attack on Kepler 4b. The galaxy moved on to other concerns. Trade disputes between minor species, scientific discoveries on distant worlds, the endless politics of the galactic concord. The massacre of human children became old news. mentioned only occasionally when someone wanted an example of Valanthi cruelty. Admiral Zorvax enjoyed his promotion. He gave more interviews, wrote a book about his military career, and attended parties where other Valanthi officers praised his bold action. He had taught the lesser species a valuable lesson, they said. He had reminded the galaxy who was truly in charge. The Valanthi Emperor Caldrus approved of all this. His empire had grown soft during the long peace, and he believed a show of strength was exactly what was needed. Let the younger species tremble. Let them remember their place. Human diplomats continued to attend meetings at the Galactic Concord. They sat quietly in their seats, listened to speeches from other species, and offered no complaints about the attack. This puzzled many observers. Where was the outrage? Where were the demands for justice? Ambassador Nathan Price represented humanity at these gatherings. He was a tall man with gray hair and a gentle smile that never quite reached his eyes. When other diplomats offered sympathy for the tragedy at Kepler 44b, he thanked them politely. When Valanthi representatives suggested that the humans had brought the attack on themselves, he simply nodded and changed the subject. A diplomat from the Karathi Federation approached. Nathan, after one particularly tense meeting, the Karathi were an old species, not as powerful as the Valanthi, but wise enough to have survived for millennia. "We do not understand," the Karathi said. "Your children were murdered. Your people were slaughtered. Yet you sit here and smile and say nothing. Are humans truly so accepting of injustice?" Nathan's smile never wavered. "We are considering our options," he said. "What options?" "The Valanthi are the most powerful empire in the galaxy. What can humanity possibly do?" Nathan looked at the Karathi for a long moment. Something flickered in his eyes, something ancient and cold that made the Karathi diplomat step backward in sudden fear. "We are patient," Nathan said softly. "That is all." He walked away, leaving the Karathi to wonder what that strange expression had meant. Behind the scenes, humanity was transforming. The awakened war fleets had been upgraded, with 300 years of technological advancement. Engines that had once been considered fast now moved at speeds that should have been impossible. Weapons that had once been devastating now carried power that defied measurement. Catherine. Cole spent every waking hour preparing her forces. She studied every Valanthi war and recorded history, learning how they thought, how they planned, how they fought. She found their weakness quickly enough. The Valanthi had not faced a real challenge in thousands of years. Their tactics were ancient and unchanging. Their defenses assumed that no enemy would ever strike first. They had grown so confident in their superiority that they had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. Catherine intended to remind them. General Marcus Webb trained his ground forces in methods that would have horrified the peaceful citizens of Earth. Combat techniques that had been forbidden for 2 millennia were taught again. Soldiers learned to fight with a savagery that their ancestors would have recognized instantly. But Marcus was careful to include one other lesson in all his training. They were not fighting for conquest or glory. They were fighting for 312 children who would never see another sunrise. Every soldier memorized the names. Every soldier understood exactly why they were preparing for war. The anniversary of the attack approached. President Daniel Moore called a secret meeting of the United Earth Council. No cameras were allowed. No records were kept. What he said was for human ears only. "For 2,000 years we have been the species we wish to become," he said, his voice steady and strong. "Peaceful, gentle, kind. We buried our nature because we were ashamed of what we had been." He paused, looking around the chamber at faces that had grown hard over the past year. "But our nature is not gone. It merely sleeps. And now it awakens." He outlined the plan they had prepared. The targets, the timeline, the expected casualties. He held nothing back. When he finished, he asked for a vote. The approval was unanimous. Catherine Cole received the final orders aboard the Sunrise. She gathered her senior officers on the bridge and displayed a holographic image of the Valanthi Empire. 900 worlds stretched across the stars, connected by trade routes and military bases and the absolute confidence that nothing could ever threaten them. "We launch tomorrow," Catherine said. "Our first target is the border station at Nexus Prime. From there, we push inward. We do not stop until we reach their homeworld." One of her officers, a young woman named Christine Hayes, raised a question. "Admiral, the Valenthi have thousands of warships. Even with our upgraded fleet, we will be outnumbered." Catherine's expression did not change. "Numbers are not everything, Lieutenant. The Valenthi have not fought a real war in millennia. They have forgotten what it means to face an enemy who is not afraid to die." She looked around at her officers, meeting each pair of eyes. "We have not forgotten. We never forgot." That night, Catherine walked alone through the corridors of her ship. She passed crew members who saluted silently, their faces determined and grim. She stopped at a small memorial that had been built in the ship's chapel. A wall covered with photographs of the children from the Sunrise Orphanage. Lucy Grant's picture was in the center. Catherine touched the image gently, remembering the girl's laugh, her curiosity, her dreams of becoming a pilot someday. "I'm sorry I couldn't protect you," Catherine whispered, "but I promise you this. They will answer for what they did, every single one of them." The first Retribution fleet launched at dawn. 12,000 warships rose from hidden bases across human space, their engines blazing with power that the galaxy had never seen. Support vessels followed by the tens of thousands. Troop transports carried 2 million soldiers who had spent the past year training for this moment. Nathan Price sent a final diplomatic message to the Galactic Concord just before the fleet entered hyperspace. It was simple and direct. Humanity is done waiting. What comes next is justice. The Valenthi Empire received a warning of the approaching fleet, but their analysts dismissed the threat. 12,000 ships against their hundreds of thousands? It would be over quickly. They had no idea what was coming for them. The Valenthi border station at Nexus Prime detected the human fleet exactly 17 seconds before it arrived. The station commander barely had time to look up from his meal before alarms screamed throughout the facility. 17 seconds was not enough time to raise shields. It was not enough time to power weapons. It was barely enough time to send a single message to Valenthi High Command. The message read, "They came out of nowhere. There are thousands of them. The humans are not what we thought they were." Then Nexus Prime ceased to exist. Catherine Cole watched the explosion from the bridge of the Sunrise. Her face showed nothing, but inside she felt something settle into place. This was the beginning. This was justice. "All ships, proceed to next target," she ordered. "We do not slow down. We do not stop." The first Retribution fleet moved through Valenthi space like a fire through dry grass. Human ships traveled faster than Valenthi analysts had believed possible. They struck targets before defenders could organize. They disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. The Valenthi military responded as they always had, sending fleets to intercept the invaders. But their tactics had not changed in thousands of years. They expected enemies to fight in predictable patterns, to follow rules that had governed galactic warfare. Since before humanity existed, humanity did not follow those rules. At the Battle of Varanthos, the Valenthi committed 600 warships to stop the human advance. Admiral Catherine Cole met them with half that number. The Valenthi commander expected a straightforward engagement, ships trading fire until one side retreated. Instead, the human fleet scattered into dozens of smaller groups that moved independently yet somehow acted as one. They struck from unexpected angles, disappeared when the Valenthi tried to concentrate fire, and reappeared where they were least expected. The battle lasted 3 days. When it ended, all 600 Valenthi ships had been destroyed. Catherine Cole had lost 47 vessels. The Valenthi High Command received the reports with disbelief. This was impossible. Humanity was a minor species with no military tradition. How could they be defeating the greatest navy in the galaxy? But the reports kept coming. Human forces struck at supply lines, communication stations, and military bases throughout Valenthi territory. They moved faster than any fleet should be able to move. They fought with a coordination and ferocity that seemed almost inhuman. General Marcus Webb landed his ground forces on Varanthos itself. But he did not come to conquer. The planet was home to millions of slaves from dozens of different species. Beings who had been captured and forced to serve, Volanthi masters for generations. Marcus broadcast on all frequencies as his soldiers advanced. We are not here for territory. We are not here for resources or slaves. We are here because your masters killed our children. Help us, and we will help you. Stand against us, and you will share their fate. The slaves watched in amazement as human soldiers fought and died to free them. These strange creatures from Earth asked nothing in return except information about Volanthi military positions. When the fighting was over, the humans helped the freed slaves organize their own governments and left supplies to help them survive. Word spread quickly through Volanthi space. The humans were not like other conquerors. They did not enslave or destroy civilian populations. They freed prisoners, treated the wounded, and showed mercy to those who surrendered. But they showed no mercy at all to Volanthi military forces. Emperor Caldrus watched the situation deteriorate from his palace on the Volanthi homeworld. His advisors told him what he did not want to hear. The human fleet was advancing faster than any enemy in Volanthi history. Traditional defenses were failing. The outer provinces were falling one by one. How is this possible? Caldrus demanded. They are a young species. They have no experience with war. His oldest advisor, a scholar who had studied alien civilizations for centuries, pulled out an ancient document. It was a report from the Elder Races, written when humanity first ventured into space. The Elder Races observed humanity carefully when they achieved faster-than-light travel, the advisor said. They noted the scars on Earth's surface, the ruins of ancient conflicts, the weapons that had been carefully hidden away. They wrote this warning, he read from the document. The species called humanity appears peaceful now, but their history suggests a capacity for violence unmatched by any civilization we have encountered. They have spent millennia perfecting the art of war against each other. Should this species ever turn its attention outward, the galaxy would do well to avoid giving them a reason. Caldrus stared at the ancient text. The sleeping giant? He whispered. Ow. Yes, Emperor. And we woke it. Catherine Cole's fleet reached the Volanthi homeworld in 3 months. The journey should have taken a year, but human engineers had found ways to push their drives beyond all known limits. The Volanthi defense fleet waited for them. The largest armada ever assembled in galactic history, 30,000. Volantha ships against 12,000 human vessels. The Battle of Volanthos Prime lasted 7 days. It was the bloodiest conflict the galaxy had ever seen. Volanthi ships fought with desperate courage, knowing that their homeworld depended on them. Human ships fought with cold precision and an absolute refusal to retreat. On the 4th day, Catherine Cole personally led a strike force against the Volanthe flagship. Her ship took severe damage, losing half its crew to enemy fire. But she pressed forward, targeting the flagship's engines and weapon systems until the massive vessel drifted helpless in space. On the 7th day, the last Volanthi warship fell silent. 30,000 ships had been reduced to debris floating in the void. Human losses were terrible, nearly 4,000 ships destroyed. But the battle was over. Catherine stood on the bridge of the sunrise, looking down at the planet below. Volanthos Prime was beautiful, covered in gleaming cities and ancient monuments to Volanthi greatness. Emperor Caldrus was down there somewhere, cowering in his palace. She could end it now. Human weapons could glass the entire planet, killing billions and erasing the Volanthi civilization forever. Part of her wanted to do exactly that. Part of her wanted them to feel the same terror those children had felt, but that was not why she had come. She opened a communication channel to the planet below. Her face appeared on every screen, in every home and office, and public square on Volanthos Prime. Your empire attacked an orphanage, she said. Her voice calm but carrying the weight of a year of preparation and pain. You murdered children, for sport. Your admiral laughed about it on your news programs. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I could destroy your world right now. I could hunt down every member of your species and end your civilization. I have that power. Her eyes were cold, but her voice remained steady. But I am not going to do that. Because if I did, I would become what you are." She leaned forward slightly, and every Volanthe who watched felt a chill run through them. "Instead, I am going to take something far more precious than your lives. I am going to take your pride. You will surrender unconditionally. You will give up your empire, and you will remember, for the rest of your history, that you were defeated by the species you thought was harmless." The transmission ended. 12 hours later, Emperor Caldrus surrendered. The surrender ceremony took place on the steps of the Imperial Palace on Volanthos Prime. Emperor Caldrus knelt before Admiral Catherine Cole, his crown removed and his ancient robes replaced with simple gray cloth. Behind him, billions of Volanthe watched through broadcast screens. Witnessing the end of 12,000 years of dominance, Catherine accepted the surrender documents without ceremony. She did not gloat or make speeches about human superiority. She simply took the papers, signed them, and handed them to her aide. "Your empire is dissolved," she said. "Your military is disbanded. Your colonies are now independent. You will pay reparations to every species you have wronged over the centuries." Caldrus nodded, unable to meet her eyes. "And what of our people? Will you enslave us as we enslaved others?" Catherine looked at him for a long moment. "No. You will be allowed to govern your homeworld and rebuild your civilization. But you will never again threaten another species. You will never again harm innocent people. If you do, we will return. And next time, there will be no surrender." The terms of peace spread across the galaxy. 900 D-worlds that had lived under Vilania's sudden rule for millennia suddenly found themselves free. Slave populations were liberated. Occupied planets chose their own governments. The map of known space had to be redrawn completely. But the most important part of the peace dealt with one individual, Admiral Zorvax. Zorvax had fled the homeworld during the final battle. Hiding in a remote outpost while his people fought and died, human intelligence operatives found him 2 weeks after the surrender, cowering in a storage room beneath a pile of supplies. Catherine Cole personally oversaw his capture. She stood in the doorway as her soldiers dragged him out, watching the once proud admiral who had laughed about murdering children. He looked smaller now, pathetic and broken. "You thought we were weak?" Catherine said quietly. "You thought you could kill our children without consequences? You were wrong." Zorvax expected execution. He expected torture. What he got was something far worse. He was taken to Kepler 4 for 2B. To the site of the orphanage he had destroyed. The colony had been rebuilt, but the location of the Sunrise Children's Home was now a memorial. 312 stone markers stood in perfect rows, each one bearing the name of a child who had died that day. Catherine gave Zorvax a choice. He could face trial before a galactic tribunal where the evidence of his crimes would be broadcast to every inhabited world. The trial would last months. Every detail of what he had done would be examined and displayed. He would become the most hated being in galactic history, or he could spend the rest of his life at the memorial. Tending the grounds where he had committed his greatest crime, Zorvax chose the memorial for the next 80 years. Until his death of old age, the former admiral lived in a small cottage at the edge of the memorial grounds. Every morning he rose before dawn to tend the gardens he had planted around each grave marker. He cleaned the stones, repaired the pathways, and greeted the families who came to mourn. He never spoke of his former glory. He never complained about his duties. When visitors asked who he was, he simply said he was the caretaker. Only those who recognized his face understood the full weight of his punishment. He spent every night sleeping beneath the stars he had once ruled. Reduced to a gardener in a cemetery of his own creation, the Galactic Concord was reformed after the war. Humanity took a leading role, not as conquerors, but as protectors. Other species looked at humans with new understanding. The peaceful traders and gentle diplomats were still there. But now, everyone knew what lived beneath that calm exterior, ambassador. Nathan Price addressed the new Galactic Assembly 1 year after the war's end. Representatives from hundreds of species filled the great chamber. Watching the human who had smiled through so many meetings while his people prepared for vengeance. "We did not want this war," Nathan said, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. We spent 2,000 years proving that we could be something other than warriors. We hoped we would never have to show the galaxy what we truly are. He looked directly into the cameras that broadcast his words to every inhabited world. We are still the humans you knew before. We still prefer peace to war, diplomacy to conflict. We still believe in cooperation and kindness and the better nature of all beings. He paused, and his gentle smile faded into something harder. But remember what we did when our children were threatened? Remember, and never force us to remind you again. Catherine Cole retired after the war. She built a small house on Kepler 44b, near the memorial that bore her goddaughter's name. She planted a garden of her own. Filled with flowers that Lucy had loved, the Sunrise Children's Home was rebuilt, larger and more beautiful than before. It accepted orphans from any species, a living symbol of what humanity chose to be. Children who had lost their families to war, disease, or disaster found a home there. Human caretakers worked alongside volunteers from a dozen different civilizations. At the entrance to the new orphanage, carved into stone that would endure for millennia, were words that every being in the galaxy came to know. We are the guardians of the innocent. We are the voice of those who cannot speak. We are humanity, and we remember. President Daniel Moore visited the memorial once, near the end of his life. He walked slowly between the grave markers, reading each name, honoring each child. His health was failing.
Ow.
But he had insisted on making this journey. A young Valanthy girl approached him as he stood before Lucy Grant's stone. She was one of thousands of Valanthy orphans who had been adopted by human families after the war. Children whose parents had died in the conflict or who had been abandoned. "Why did you show mercy to my people?" she asked. "After what we did to you, why didn't you destroy us?" Daniel knelt down to her level, his old knees protesting. He looked into her eyes, seeing the same innocence that Lucy Grant had shown. "Because vengeance is not the same as justice," he said, "and because every child, no matter what species, deserves a chance to grow up in peace."
Oh.
The girl thought about this for a moment. Then she nodded seriously and placed a flower on Lucy's grave marker. She walked away, holding her human mother's hand. A living symbol of the forgiveness humanity had chosen over hatred, Catherine Cole watched from her garden nearby. She thought about Lucy, about the war, about everything that had been lost and gained. The galaxy was at peace now. A peace that would last because everyone understood the cost of breaking it. Humanity had shown the universe to truths that day at Kepler 44b. The first was that they could be the most terrifying force the galaxy had ever seen, capable of destroying empires that had stood for millennia. The second was that they chose not to be. They chose mercy over vengeance, justice over destruction, hope over despair. They rebuilt instead of burning. They freed instead of enslaving. They forgave instead of hating. And in doing so, they proved something that no weapon or fleet could ever demonstrate. True strength was not the power to destroy. True strength was the power to destroy, and choosing not to use it. The Valanthy had attacked an orphanage. Earth destroyed 2,000 years of peace in response. But what they built from the ashes was something better. A galaxy where the innocent were protected and the guilty were held accountable. The sleeping giant had awakened, had roared its fury across the stars, and then had chosen to sleep again. But everyone knew it was still there, waiting beneath the surface. And everyone knew that it would wake again if needed. That was enough. That would always be enough.